imperfect people change the world because they are the only kind of people we've ever had.
Welcome to Leaders of the West, a podcast for innovators and changemakers. I'm your host, Jessie Jarvis, the founder of the West, and I'm sitting down with agriculturalists, entrepreneurs, executives, and everyone in between with the goal of digging into the strategies, mindsets, and lessons that have been crucial to the success of ag and Western. Whether you're carrying on the next generation of your family's operation, starting something from scratch, or determined to climb up the leadership ladder, we're going to inspire you to continue to dream big, growing not just you, but the future of agriculture and Western as a whole. Let's go.
Welcome back to a brand new episode of the show today. Here's how we're going to kick things off. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about how I develop these podcast episodes. And there is a reason behind that. That is not the topic of today's episode by any means, but I want to use that as kind of a preface to the topic at hand. So when it comes to how I write these, there are two different types of shows. One where I sit down and I just spitball, right? I have a thought and I want to kind of pull up my soapbox on it, or in the notes app of my phone, I might have 3 bullets and it just kind of goes from there. And then there are those that I really intentionally sit down and I put pen to paper and I write that topic. And I typically do that when there's a complex issue at hand or it's something that has a lot of layers. I want to make sure that I'm really articulating exactly how I feel, or there's maybe more than one side that needs to be considered. And I just want to make sure that I provide all of the necessary information. That being said, when I write that type of show, there are times and situations like this today, which is why I'm sharing this, that I write something and then I just let it sit for a while. And I don't necessarily know why that is. Sometimes I will write something and I will record it that very same day. And then there are other times where I just kind of want to sit with it for a while. And so that is today's episode. So this is one that I sat down and actually wrote right after Martin Luther King Day. So that was back in January. But now 6 months later, I am finally getting a chance to record this. So I know that when I refer to Martin Luther King Day as being recent, you guys are like, but wait a minute, no, that was 6 months ago. I too am fully aware that this was 6 months ago. But this is a situation that happened to me on Martin Luther King Day, which is really what made me think about this at the level that I did. So on Martin Luther King Day itself, obviously for many of us, this is a 3-day weekend. And I went to town on that Monday for a very expertly planned marathon of errands. I needed to get home in time for Jackson's parent-teacher conferences. And in order to make it back in time, I really needed everything to go as planned. And let me tell you guys, it did not. I got stuck behind a train in Jerome, which if you're not familiar with Idaho, you're not going to know where Jerome is. But I have literally driven through Jerome for the last 36 years of my life. And I have never once gotten stopped by a train on one of these little side train track situations. And it sat there for about 20 minutes. And it was one of those that it would pull ahead and then it would back up and it would pull ahead and it would back up. It was just a whole situation in itself. Then I pulled into Costco, having forgotten that it was Martin Luther King Day. Because again, if you are a rancher, you are often unaware of what day of the week it is, if it is a 3-day weekend, if it's a national holiday, like those things, they very much matter to us, but it doesn't change our day-to-day lives. I also remember that there was road construction, and I also got a call from the medical supply company that I use where I had to reorder medical supplies, which it's the beginning of the year. You are rolling over into a brand new deductible, and it was a lovely $1,300, which really is just a kick in the pants. Everybody I dealt with seemed to be in a bad mood, and it was the type of day that could easily take a person's mood from like really great to really, really bad. And I shared some of that online in stories like I often do. It was a lesson in patience from a day where everything seemed to be very determined to go sideways. And of course, like I tried to do, I made it funny because I think that's what we relate most to. And I said that Jesus was taking me on a patience tour, but I wasn't sure that I had signed up for it. And later in the day, once I got home, because it was Martin Luther King Day, I connected it back to him as far as patience and perseverance was concerned. Now, let me tell you guys about my DMs on Instagram. There was a group of people who got incredibly mad that I did not acknowledge Martin Luther King enough with what was going on in the world again at that time with ICE raiding different cities. How dare I be bothered by a train or long lines at the grocery store? I was told that I was ignorant. I was told that I was insensitive. I was told that I was privileged and completely out of touch. Another group of people got mad that I acknowledged him at all. I was told that he was an adulterer. I was sent Instagram posts from other accounts with articles that I did not ask for, by the way, that detailed his multiple affairs and how he denounced Christ and other things that I don't necessarily feel necessary to mention on this show. But I was also told that if I considered myself to be a Christian, how dare I highlight such a man? Ironically enough, some of those people had Bible verses in their bios. So, just keep that one in mind. There are literally people in my DMs trying to rake me over the coals because I didn't do enough and also because I did too much. Now, first things first, I do fully understand that that is part of the territory when it comes to sharing things online. That is an inherent risk that I am signing up for anytime that I hit publish on any piece of content. But that whole exchange that day made something very, very clear for me. When it comes to being online, there is no winning. If you stay silent on an issue, you're wrong. If you talk about an issue, you're wrong. If you say the wrong thing, then you are very wrong. You are literally damned if you do and damned if you don't. And honestly, in what world does that make sense? Now, if I want to zero in on the group of people who were outraged that I would share anything kind about Martin Luther King, they are disgusted that a man with flaws is so celebrated by our country. To them, the bad far outweighed the good that he did, if, according to them, he did any good at all, right? Somewhere along the way, though, we have created this expectation that a person has to be either flawless or fully disqualified. There is no room for somebody to be both. There is no room for things to be complicated. There is no room for they were right about this, but they were wrong about that. And in my personal opinion, this is the thing that we say we all despise, which is cancel culture. When a large group of people withdraw their support from a public figure, a company, or even an idea because they've done or said something that it's considered offensive, objectionable, morally wrong, often leading to public shaming and professional consequences, usually amplified through social media. That is the definition of cancel culture. And as we've seen in situations like those, the person in question could have done 100 things correct, but the world is zeroing in on the one thing that they did that was wrong. Now, of course, if you do a lot of great stuff and then you go murder somebody, that one thing definitely outweighs all the good that you did. I think we're all rational people and we know that I'm not talking about things that are that grave in nature. But back to the people who have changed the world, none of them are flawless. Why? Because none of us are flawless. Nobody on this earth is perfect. Humans are not either or. They are always both and. So take George W. Bush. He is a politician who in my lifetime I've always really admired. He is somebody who a lot of people deeply respected as a person. And after 9/11, he stood on the rubble with the bullhorn and he helped what was a grieving nation feel united. I don't think it matters what side you are on. It is hard to see that and not feel like a true American in that moment. You know what? He also has a DUI on his record. He partied. He misspoke. He is not a spotless human being. The good and the bad about him, both of those things are true. Winston Churchill, he is a person who he held the line against Hitler when most of the world wanted to appease Hitler. And without Churchill's stubbornness, I think it's safe to say that global history would look very, very different than it does today. He was also known for being an incredibly heavy drinker. He was abrasive and stubborn and incredibly difficult to work with. The good and the bad about him, both of those things are true. Steve Jobs is somebody who was brilliant. He's a visionary. He helped create, obviously, Apple and Pixar, and he changed the way that the entire world thinks about design, technology, storytelling. Can you guys imagine if we did not have the iPhone and all that Apple has created in the way of technology? I can also tell you, without that, we probably wouldn't even be listening to a podcast right now. But he was also somebody who was known for being very abrasive and cutting and was known for being kind of a cruel human. He had a terrible relationship with one of his children and it denied her for a number of years. So the same mind that gave us the iPhone also wounded people who were very close to him. The good and the bad about that man, both are true. Johnny Cash, people, especially in our world, they love his music. You can't go into a retail store and not find a Johnny Cash band tee of some kind. And all kinds wear those t-shirts, not just people who are from the West. He wrote songs that, they really gave dignity to prisoners and addicts and workers and people who would probably consider themselves to be a broken group of people. He sang about faith and failure in a way that people still really feel very deeply. He significantly battled substance abuse, though. He cheated. His personal life was very messy and very chaotic. There are good things about him and there are bad things about him. Both are very true. Marie Curie won 2 Nobel Prizes. She discovered radium, pioneered radiation research, and she changed the future of medicine. She famously said that nothing in life is to be feared, it is only to be understood. Those are massive contributions to this world. But her personal life was very, very complicated. She had an affair that caused a very, very public scandal. Guess what? The good and the bad about her, both of those are true. Albert Einstein, he was a once-in-a-century mind who literally changed physics. He reshaped how we understand the universe. He gave us ideas that still power technology and science today. But he was also, by most historical accounts, a disastrous husband, a terrible father. There are good things and there are bad things about him. Both are true. Ray Charles, how incredible is it that a man who is blind can play music in such a way? He is literally the definition of not making excuses when things get hard. How can you not be impressed, in awe of the way that he blended gospel and R&B and jazz and country in a way that truly nobody had ever done before? He became one of the most influential musicians in American history, and his music is also one that was able to cut through race and political lines. He also had a very long battle with a heroin addiction. The good and the bad about him, both are very true. I also want to make this clear. I am not condemning any of these people and specifically trying to out them or zero in on only their flaws. 2 opposing things are allowed to be true. The good and the bad about people can be true. And some of the clearest examples of this live in faith. Peter is somebody who is impulsive. He was emotional, bold until he got scared. And when Jesus was arrested, Peter panicked and he denied even knowing him on 3 different occasions. He folded under pressure. That same Peter then became a key leader in the early church. He, who was the person who broke under fear, became the person who spent the rest of his life pointing people back to courage and to faith. Paul is somebody who in the early part of his life was persecuting Christians. He oversaw imprisonment and violence, and then he had a radical conversion and became one of the most influential Christian thinkers in history. He wrote 14 letters that make up a massive portion of the New Testament. So a man who literally tried to shut the church down ended up being the one who built it. If God can use flawed people, why can't we learn from them and respect them, knowing that none of us, except for him, the maker of men, are perfect? And it's not just famous people, it's well-known leaders. This happens in our real lives too. There is somebody who I am great friends with, and as is my husband. He is one of the greatest people that we know. He would do anything for us anytime that we called. He's a terrible father. He literally knows his kid and has absolutely nothing to do with him. And I can't stand that about him. But I can respect him for his other talents, and maybe by seeing the way that Justin and I interact and love our kids, it might encourage him to someday do the same. There is no one person on this earth who is perfect in every way, in every area. That does not exist at all. And in my opinion, this is what real life looks like. It's not saints and villains. It's just people. Some of us are strong in some areas and we're failing in others, but we are still very capable of impact. The problem is that cancel culture takes out the reality and says, if you fail in one area, I don't want anything from you in any area at all. and we will quietly cross people off the list, and not just celebrities, right? Neighbors, pastors, coaches, leaders, family members, whoever it may be. Somebody messes up in one category and we decide we can't learn anything from what they've done or said. And cancel culture, it doesn't just shut people down, it shuts conversations down as well. Because as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, if you stay silent on an issue, you're wrong. If you talk about an issue, you're wrong. And if you say the wrong thing, right, then you are very, very wrong. You are literally damned if you do and damned if you don't. And again, in what world does that make sense? We keep asking why people online have become so flippant and surface level. Maybe they have, but maybe it's also because we have pushed them to be that way. We punish anybody who thinks out loud in real time before they have it all perfectly cleaned up in some nice little PR approved bite-sized caption. If every opinion gets interrogated and every sentence gets graded like you were back in high school and every misstep gets screenshotted for sport, why aren't we surprised when people aren't willing to share what's on their mind and when they go quiet? And here's one of the things that really frustrates me with that is we say we want honesty and depth and real conversations, but the second that somebody tries, we jump on them because it doesn't fit the script that we have pre-approved for them in our minds, but we've also never actually bothered to ask if that's how they feel. Not one of the people who was in my DMs on Martin Luther King Day asked me how I personally felt about the man as a whole. They just assumed, based on what I shared in 2 stories, and took the rest into their own hands. Now, over the years, there have been plenty of things that I have stayed quiet on, and I have received plenty of messages about. For example, last year, during Eastern Idaho's water curtailment, I had plenty of people from that specific area, and those even outside of Idaho, send me a message saying that they couldn't believe I wasn't using my platform to stand up for Idaho farmers. Do I like to see water get taken away from farmers in the middle of a growing season? Absolutely not. That is the kind of thing that will literally cripple an operation. But I also know that that specific issue is very nuanced. I understand the process of water rights and the priority that goes with the history of your water right and the difference between groundwater and surface water. That issue was far more complex than any person can share in an online platform. And I don't even have every single detail. And I'm somebody who sees both sides. So I stayed quiet, not because I didn't care, but because blasting half of my take onto the internet didn't feel helpful or honest. And again, I knew that that was probably going to do more harm than good. I think what it comes down to is that we say we're bothered that people don't speak up about things, but what we're actually bothered by is that they aren't speaking up the way we want them to be speaking up. How selfish of us to think that somebody who is a completely different person with completely different set of life experiences that have undoubtedly shaped their belief systems needs to have the exact same opinions that we do. We don't actually want people to think for themselves. What we want is for people to agree with us. But adults don't operate that way. Adults can hold 2 truths at once. Adults can say, this person failed here, and I still learned something from them over there. We're allowed to cherry pick. We can take the good, we can leave the bad, and we can keep moving. If we demanded perfection before we ever allowed somebody to teach us, challenge us, inspire us, we eliminate every mentor, every leader, every single innovator, parent, pastor, teacher, coach, and neighbor that we have ever had in our lives. Personally, I want to have the kind of conviction that Martin Luther King did. I want to be able to lead in unshakable confidence the way that Winston Churchill and George Bush did in a time where they had no idea what would come next. I want to be able to give second chances to people the way that Johnny Cash did, knowing that we can change for the better. I want to have the kind of persistence like Ray Charles, putting in the reps when that is the very last thing that I want to do, knowing that the cards are stacked against me, but I am not going to back down. I want to be as brilliant as Albert Einstein and Marie Curie and Steve Jobs, knowing that I have the power to create life-changing positive impact. I'm also committed to my husband. I am committed to my family. I am committed to responsible, healthy choices. I am committed to leading with kindness. I am not perfect. I make so many mistakes, and I'm probably going to continue to in the future. And I can strive for each and every one of those things because I am looking up to the best of the best in every specific area. knowing that we all have our flaws. We're all sinners, but we are all God's children, and He still loves us and accepts us as who we are. Imperfect people change the world because they are the only kind of people we've ever had. And I think the real takeaway here isn't about history or leaders or public figures at all, but it's about how we treat living, breathing humans right now, especially when it comes to our connections online. Because behind every post, story, imperfect sentence that is shared in real time, there is a person who is still learning and still processing and still trying to make sense of the world, just like the rest of us are. And if we believe that imperfect people can change the world, then we have to make room for imperfection in conversation too. We can't just pile on people. We have to be more willing to ask questions. We have to do less assuming and have more curiosity. Because I think if we keep demanding perfection before we ever allow somebody to speak, we're not just going to cancel people. We are going to cancel dialogue and growth and everything about humanity that we really claim to care about. The world doesn't change because people get it right every time. It changes when people are brave enough to show up anyways, flaws and all, and when the rest of us decide to meet them with a little more patience. It's a reminder that I know I needed, and honestly, I think that it is a reminder that we all need at some time or another. And truly, who knew that sweet Jesus taking me on a patience tour on a Monday morning on Martin Luther King Day would impact me the way that it did? And I hope that it positively impacted you as well. None of us are perfect. We all have flaws, and that doesn't take away from the good that we can do, because if God can use flawed people, why can't we learn from them and respect them, knowing that none of us, except for Him, the maker of all men, are perfect. And with that, you guys, I hope you have an incredible rest of your week. We will be back next week. There's going to be a brand new solo episode. Stay tuned. It's a good one, I promise. We'll see you then.
If you loved this episode, do us a favor and share it with someone else who might find just as much value in it as you did. We're on a mission to continue to grow and strengthen the future of agriculture and Western industries, and you spreading the word helps us make more of a positive impact. It also makes a big difference when you take a minute to go rate and review the show. We can't thank you enough for listening, for sharing, and for loving Ag and Western as much as we do. We'll see you back here for our next episode.